evening. How's everyone? Good evening. Good evening. I'm relatively new to Baltimore. I started teaching. I'm a playwright, and I teach in the theater department at Goucher College. And I'm very proud to be part of this event. It's sort of my first Baltimore public event, and it's a very special project. I'm the youngest of five first-generation Chinese-American children. So for better or for worse, I think I usually feel like and probably act out like the youngest person in the room all the time. But funny thing, after being ordained an autumn leaves elder, suddenly, and I'm only 52, the same age as the number of Ray Lewis's retired number, right? So funny, but after I was ordained an officially elder autumn leaver, suddenly some of my Goucher students are saying, "Oh, it's so great to know what old theater people do." So thanks, Peter. I was born and raised in New York City, in the great borough of Queens, in a town called Flushing. Yes, just what it sounds like. And back then, Orioles fans should know us Mets fans hate the Yankees as much as you guys do. So anyway, okay. So growing up in Flushing at that time, we were one of the few Asian families there. My parents ran a Chinese hand laundry, and they were illegal immigrants from the southern Chinese province of Guangzhou, and they were from an arranged marriage. So on the inside, this was enough to make me feel like I was growing up in a separate century than the anything goes of New York City of 1970s. But then on the outside, by the end of the 70s, Flushing started to become New York City's second Chinatown. So over the arc of my teenage years, I went from being one of the few Asian kids in my neighborhood to being the only Americanized Asian person in what was becoming a real immigrant Asian community. In many ways, I felt this was emblematic of American immigration and assimilation in the 20th century. We worked so hard to get there, and by the time we get there, there's no there. I wrote a monologue about this that I performed a lot called The Last Emperor of Flushing. Because like China's last emperor, Asen Goro Puyi, you're looking at the last of my line and kind. See, not only my parents illegal immigrants from southern China, they lived through the Chinese Exclusion Act. That was one of the few U.S. laws that made it illegal for one group of people to become citizens here. So because of that, they didn't take a thing for granted. And my memento tonight reflects this. My father drilled a hole into a quarter and kept it on his keychain. And every night, about half past his second scotch, he would remind me, "I keep this on my keychain in my pocket, so when I die, at least I'll have 2 bits on me." My mother would further build my confidence by saying, "Fudoi," that's my sort of Chinese name, "there's no good people out there. All the good people you ever need are right here in a laundry. There's no good people out there." So I grew up in mortal fear of thinking, what would happen if my parents disappear? And being a theater practitioner, this is actually a prop. The real quarter I put in my father's pocket at his funeral in 1977. And then in 2002, when my mother passed away, I suddenly had to face it. I had become spiritually orphaned. But thankfully, by this time, I was blessed to be in love with the woman who would become my wife, Wendy Wasdahl. And as we're both theater practitioners, we often talk about what happens to theater, the most ephemeral of art forms, after the play is over, when the show's over, after the production's over. And we feel that theater becomes soul, just like all of our lives. We live on inside everyone who experiences us, who loves us, hates us, just interacts with us, and just like our lives do. And after my mother died, I was looking for some soul solace, and of course, I turned to theater. And I started to reread Thornton Wilder's classic Americana play, Our Town. Our Town, as you know, by page 2, you know that all the characters are dead, except for that trickster of a narrator called the stage manager. Towards the end of the play, the stage manager offers Emily a chance to go back in time and spend one more day with her deceased parents. And she thinks, I'm going to choose my 12th birthday, but the stage manager warns her, choose the least important day. That will be important enough. My parents' passing and our town were a big inspiration for the last Emperor of Flushing. And a few years later, they all came together when, in researching to teach a class in our town, I found out that our town actually has a lot of Chinese inspiration and influence. Thornton Wilder spent part of his childhood in Hong Kong and Shanghai when his father was consul general there. And the Peking opera he saw really informed our town. In 2011, Wendy and I got to conduct a Fulbright residency at City University of Hong Kong. And let's take a second, God bless those student protesters who are on the streets right now. And in this residency, the young 21st century Chinese students wrote and performed their own plays in reaction to our town. As part of this residency, I got to perform The Last Emperor of Flushing in my family's ancestral province of Guangzhou. And communicating our stories in two languages in which they were not fluent, English and theater, was like bringing their souls home. Theater had given us a lot of solace. What I try to impart to our Goucher students is something I would tell my 21-year-old. I know you're facing a lot of pressure to be successful, to be in love, but before you can achieve any of these things, you have to learn to be. But learning to be can be a lifelong journey. So don't be so caught up on just getting there. Focus on being here, being now. Choose the least important day. It'll be important enough. Or it'll be, as my mother used to say, too much better. Thank you for listening.